All right, we are finally up and running. Thank you so much, Teresa, for coming online, for talking to us about business development for startups and entrepreneurs. Let me just put up a screen share here so everyone can see what we're actually talking about. So here you can see we're talking to Teresa, who works at Microsoft and is the entrepreneur in residence. And my name is Arjun, like Argentina without the Tina. I'm the founder and CEO of Wrkbench, which is a visual collaboration tool for creative and visual people. But today we're going to be talking about business development tactics and strategies, how small companies can work with big companies, for example, Microsoft. And Teresa is going to be giving us a quick rundown of that. But before we get started, Teresa, can you describe to us what you do at Microsoft and how startups can work with you?
Sure. So a little bit of background about me. I have been at Microsoft for about 3 years.
Okay.
So I didn't grow up at Microsoft. I'm not from Microsoft. I am, part of the New York startup ecosystem and have about a 20-year career, kind of either being with a small company or with a really big company, at that intersection between the two. So it's definitely something that I feel, very passionate about. I was on the founding team of a startup that IPO'd.
Congratulations.
I've worked with it. Yeah, it was a long time ago. It can be tough when you have an early win to replicate that. And also, as part of larger companies, have been very involved in doing work either with smaller companies or with kind of innovation initiatives and trying to drive that kind of change, on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
So when Microsoft hired me in, part of it was around, rethinking how Microsoft engages with startups, because relevance really, has needed to be reestablished, and for the New York ecosystem. And when you think about New York specifically, how much of the Fortune 500 is like within walking distance, substantial. So if you look at what's special about New York compared to other ecosystems, startups being able to interface with that and grow big by virtue of that is a tremendous opportunity. So that's something that I've been really, fascinated by very much. So then at the same time, we think about what Microsoft is and what Microsoft is good at, or what assets, it has that might be deployed, or leveraged on behalf of entrepreneurs. Microsoft has relationships with all these companies. We've got people that sell into them, that do business with them, in a number of different ways.
What are some ways that you found to be working for example, for Microsoft itself, but in generally, what are some ways that entrepreneurs are able to reach out to you and actually get your attention?
Sure. So the big focus that I have right now on the kind of on the pedestrian side is that, cloud is a major focus for us.
Sure.
And we are selling that cloud into lots and lots of our customers. We've got sellers that are calling on them.
Sure.
We also sell a lot of developer tools and then analytics, and we have our own CRM solutions. We're Office 365 licenses. I mean, that's a really big one, right? There's a lot of Office 365 in a lot of companies. So those just give you, some examples of kind of, there's a word, I knew the word, but I didn't have the context before I came into Microsoft that people use, that they call a sales motion. Because if you imagine thousands of people on the ground effectively carrying bags, selling into and metriced to sell into these places. So it opens up an interesting question of, can a startup somehow ride that or attach into that and be part of it?
Let's talk about the sales motion. Can you describe and can you define what that actually means to you, an entrepreneur?
So what's happening, let's say by Microsoft, and this is happening in lots of different companies, but in terms of, let's say, co-selling, that we've got lots of people who are commissioned, or metriced and paid to hit targets at various customers. And it may or may not matter if they're selling Microsoft's own products or our partners' products.
So these people are in the sales funnel and they're selling partner products, they're selling Microsoft products, and sales motion is basically the philosophy, or it's the
would
notion.
call that like it's a whole army of people, that have lists that they're responsible for going in and having conversations.
Got it.
And they get measured on their effectiveness in having those conversations and, selling through. And those are relationships that evolve over time, and, they're ongoing, living, breathing things.
So how do companies, like a small company, how do they get into that funnel itself? What are some of the steps that entrepreneurs can take in order to start that relationship, have a conversation, and move from there?
So there are a few different ways. Actually, I would like to bifurcate two different places where I'll help startups. One is actually really simple, or it's simple to understand. Doing any of this is a lot harder than actually, than saying it, as in most things. But one is actually thinking about Microsoft as a customer, right? So if Microsoft is going to sell through to its customers something, or co-sell, or bring something along, makes a big difference if Microsoft says, yeah, we're using it too, and we love it. So I've worked with a number of startups where we were kind of working on something like that, so there's a unit within Microsoft where it seemed, in speaking to the startup, that Microsoft's goals would be enhanced or reached faster if that startup was part of the solution. If that makes sense.
Sure. So there's a goal, there's a strategy that the executive team or someone at the helm is looking to achieve, and a startup comes along and can help them achieve that much faster.
Yeah. So there's a phrase inside of Microsoft called "get to green."
I'm sorry?
There's a phrase called "get to green."
Okay.
Right. And imagine someone needs to get to green. They're red, 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 and then they get yellow, and then they're green. Right. If you can find out, so what are you measured on? What are you trying to achieve? And then if your tool or your thing is an ingredient to helping someone get to green, then there is already a momentum happening, and it's a question of you scoping and fitting and hitting the right timing, and differentiating yourself from the competitive set to help them get to green.
And so so Microsoft could be a customer, and that's one way to get into the company itself and start a conversation. Yeah. What is the other version of getting into the company that you were alluding to earlier?
Yeah. So other ways are through kind of our ecosystem of partners.
Okay.
And an example would be we have something called the Azure Marketplace. There's also a growing ecosystem of apps being built on top of Office 365, as an example. So similarly, if we have sellers that are selling, Azure Cloud, right, which is like an off the rack, thing, it doesn't matter if they're selling it sort of like the pure compute, or if it's Azure that's being consumed by a partner in the system that's delivering the solution. Okay,
so if a company comes along and starts working on one of your platforms and starts getting attention and becomes popular, Microsoft will notice and would want to work with them more so than just any other company in the field. Is that correct?
Kind of. I mean, I think that's true, but I want to sort of sharpen the knife a little bit more.
Okay.
we've got a lot of people that are selling a whole lot of stuff at scale really, really fast.
Right.
So the way I would view it is, for better for worse, you got to fit into what they're doing.
Mhm.
And then you want to sell it at like 1,000,000 units. Okay. Rather than, a single project that takes you, forever. So it's a lot of upfront prep. And so it may not be the right thing for like a startup in its first year of
Right.
existence. But once you've been baked a little bit more, then these are the types of relationships where you can really drive scale. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say we have a service, you can look it up, that's been recently announced, this blockchain as a service on Azure.
Okay.
Blockchain. So blockchain is hot. And I'm not an expert in blockchain, so but bear with me for the concept here. Which is, there are a lot of really interesting startups that are doing really cool stuff with blockchain. Okay.
And what is it called? Blockchain as a what?
As a service. Blockchain
Okay.
as a service. So it's like BaaS, kind of like SaaS, but it's SPAS. Okay. And we've got people that are selling into, big banks and financial institutions who are, playing around with blockchain and trying to figure out what they kind of want and need, and they need to experiment. So if we can curate and
Right.
expose a whole lot of different types of services, like we don't know who's going to win. And I don't know that we want to call the winners. I think we want to create a playground so that those startups can be awesome and be exposed and then be, picked so that they can be played with. And the thing
Sure.
is that we're all powered by cloud. So we want to be exposing, we want them to create like a version or a tenancy that's powered by our cloud, because then we'll include it in our blockchain as a service set of offerings. And then what happens is, we have a lot of big customers that are, they are buying cloud from us. They've agreed to spend a certain amount on cloud, and now they have to go use it. So we can direct them towards this directory, if you will, and their IT department can pull and just get to work. Do you know what I mean? And so the startup services can get pulled through this motion.
Okay. So let's
Does
just
that
say
make
that
sense?
you're allowing for services, you're allowing for tools and resources that a startup can take advantage to build their own software or solution. And when they do it effectively, other customers who come to you for looking for those solutions, and not necessarily that Microsoft's offering it, but that there's a company in the ecosystem that's offering it, you can very easily direct that potential customer in that direction. That's one way that startups.
Yeah. Think of us as a distribution channel.
Oh, okay, got it.
Right, a distribution channel. And so we don't believe that every single tool around the blockchain is going to be created by us, right?
Right.
On the contrary, the best tools will not be created by us, and in fact, we don't know what the innovation is going to be, completely. And there's a lot we just can't anticipate. And so inviting in innovative companies to participate in their takes on the solution and their so that our customers can combine them and experiment and stuff like that. We want to make it easy for those startups to get exposed, and then really delightful and easy for those customers of ours to play in that sandbox.
Got it. No,
And,
that makes absolute sense. So win-win situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Gotcha.
It's like a distribution channel. Another example is just, all different kinds of developer tools.
Mm-hmm.
There's a startup I worked with, super cool, out of Boston. They came through Techstars, love this team, called Data Camp. And they built a platform that teaches developers how to code in R. R is, okay, the favorite data science, open source data science language. And it happens that we have channels, like online learning channels,
Sure.
and a very large developer community. And we've got a whole lot of people that are constantly developing content to reach those developers. And we recognize very much that, they're not only going to be using our tools again, and in fact, some of them are, classical .NET developers, but some of them are not, and some of them are a hybrid. And so it seemed really intriguing to, a lot of developers are very interested in learning R, and they had been primarily going to the core, open source developer community. What I did was I wound up connecting them up with the learning team for our channels to say, hey, wouldn't this be really interesting content to our community of developers, which is quite substantial. And that's what they wound up, doing together. So this startup brought them something that they didn't have. And, but they had a great captive, audience of developers that was very compelling to the startup. So that did take a bit of hand-holding on my part to kind of discover that. But, if I kind of broker it and help it along, the startup needs to perform when they get there. But if I can save them time or give them that inside track to, did you know that, it's not private information, but little known fact, we actually educate a whole lot of developers, and, you want to educate a lot of developers. So maybe it's worth a conversation,
So basically we're looking at when can you create opportunities where it's a win-win situation? Because one of the things that I'm sure you can relate to, a lot of entrepreneurs will come to a big company and say, either acquire us or give us more business. And it's a one-way street the entrepreneur is going after, but really it's a two-way street where both companies need to hit a bottom line and create a win-win situation. And such as the example you gave for the developer community, it really helps that company and the founder get noticed by a bigger company like Microsoft. It's not just a one-way street.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So I think what I'm hearing you say, or maybe I'm interpreting what you just said, if there is a degree to which if Microsoft is working with them, or we've done some stuff together, it does provide some degree of trust, or endorsement that we're spending time with them. And that absolutely has happened before. So, that I've made introductions for entrepreneurs into other companies, either off of my personal Rolodex or through our, customer relationships. And they just accepted those introductions a lot more readily than they might have if the entrepreneur, cold called. Now, when I make those introductions, it's usually not based on, I met them yesterday at a panel and today I'm going to introduce them.
Of course,
generally there's been a relationship that's developed over time, and I've watched patterns,
Sure.
like you're someone that we've known each other now for a few years, right? I've watched you hustle. I've watched you go again and again. I've watched you impress people. So it's very low risk for me to introduce you to one of my really good contacts.
Oh, gee, thank you. I'm going to hold you.
You're welcome. I am flattering, and I know you're going to hold me to it. But it's that pattern over time that's really helpful, both to get me through the binary, like not introduction to yes, giving an introduction, and then being, persuasive in giving the introduction. It also is helpful to have that buffer where, sometimes that introducer can say, maybe I would reach out to someone, they'd say, you know what, that's not a strategic, it's nothing wrong with the entrepreneur, but it's just not a strategic focus for us right now. Helpful for you to know that so you don't waste your time, or it might be, that's really interesting to us, but we have something else happening for the next 2 months that we're totally focused on. So better for us to loop back to us in August. Let's do that. And so, I know, having been an entrepreneur, it's scary, right? To go ask people to take the meetings and to talk to you, and you feel like you're being judged. But there is a lot going on that has nothing to do with you, So what you really want to do is try to rifle through as many possibilities so that you could qualify which ones you advance to the next level, so that they're taking the meeting and you're taking the meeting. I mean, as an entrepreneur, your time is so super valuable too. And
so that brings me to the next point of having a clear-cut business development target. And actually, the article you see up here, it's a guest post by Holger Ludorf on Fred Wilson's blog, and he talks about having a clear, you can see here, clear business development target, so you're not chasing, endlessly, and you're not wasting your time. And the next thing he talks about, the article talks about, is structuring your approach. Can you shed some light about how entrepreneurs can actually get that focus so they're not wasting their own time, but also the time of the large company?
Yeah. So I haven't read that article. I'd love to loop back to it, but I'm going to riff on what I would do as a structural play. And I'm sure there's some stuff embedded in there that
is
absolutely great too. But, one is, so let's say you've got your list, right? And it's well-defined. So one aspect is
companies or things you're looking. What kind of list are we talking about?
Well, it needs to get down to company, and then even then, it needs to get down to who's the buyer.
Absolutely, the company,
and then even among the buyer, like sometimes you have who are the state, depending on your product. Is it something that one person can say yes to, or is it something that you need a whole lot of different people to get on board with? Do you have stakeholders, but then a budget holder, or do different budget holders have to contribute in? Two things. One is that the simpler it is to make a decision, the easier it's going to be for you, obviously, right?
Right.
And then, as the biz dev person, you need to map that and understand, who you need to get to, and almost model out what'll it take to get for that. You need to know what you're asking for. Like, what is it you're asking for, and what will it take for them to say yes to it?
Got it.
So to tell you the truth, I mean, I did say who owns the budget, but in reality, an early stage startup, like getting a first yes from a big either customer or partner, and in terms of a partner, there's probably not going to be a cash exchange. But what you're probably looking for is a pilot for free, where a group of people will meaningfully try it. They'll value it enough that they're really going to try it and really give you feedback, and maybe hopefully then turn that into paid. Or so it gives you, distribution or something.
Sure. So along the last tip you just gave, what I've been hearing a lot, and we've been doing for Wrkbench, is that we've been getting large companies and medium companies and freelancers and whatnot to give us letters of intent. Now, in enterprise SaaS, that has been a way to get better valuations, get higher, be able to raise higher amounts of money for the venture itself. What is your opinion on letters of intent and how effective those are? To buy into the product or give a trial, or say that they're interested in versus just having a large waiting list of potential customers.
I think anything that you can do to differentiate and move just a little bit further up the chain is helpful.
Okay.
I'm sure that there are people who are skeptical of the letter of intent.
Okay.
Or would be like, it doesn't really mean anything. So yeah, it's a tough call. I mean, I think it depends on the area, and also how much time does it take for you to get the letter of intent?
Right.
I mean, it definitely is impressive when, let's put it this way. I've brokered some introductions into some very, very large companies. Okay. Mm-hmm. And these are the types of ones where a startup's product may be deployed at a bunch of small companies, and maybe like a medium company. So maybe go from, deployed at, 500 seats or 1,000 seats or something like that, and then maybe they just got, a big one that would be 5,000 seats. And now they're looking for one that would be 50,000 seats, like big, like a step up, difference. So decision makers at that level of company are going to be thinking about, like, okay, where is it deployed live and how's it working? You know, because you can't deploy at that broad level and have it not work, you know, or how do we, they're looking to de-risk. So everything that you're doing is creating a story that not only gives them benefit, but de-risks their trial with you as much as possible and like gives them a way out.
So the question is, how do you de-risk their own buy-in into the product itself so it's easier for them to talk about it within the large company itself?
I would tend to look into one of two areas. You know, one is an area that is so broken that anything that you do is going to be better than what it already was, you know? So like just doing nothing is a big risk, right? And then an alternative is there are areas, there are just sometimes people or customers or something that are either on the hook to innovate and show new stuff, or they have a propensity for doing that. You know, they like to try things earlier.
Right.
So they just have a higher risk tolerance. Useful, you know, to find those. And or an area where there's just enough of a balance, like, you know, it's kind of out of the center enough that if it totally fails, it's not going to make those people look stupid, right? But if it does go well, it would be reasonably relevant for scaling across more parts of the company. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. And so so let's go back to the start itself. So as you know, a lot of investors would like a business person and would like a technology person. So there's a fine balance between who's building the product and who's selling the product. 500 Startups talks about what is that business guy and what does he or she do anyway. What is your opinion on the roles that an individual should play in the startup itself? My opinion is that everyone should be selling constantly. So, I mean, for example, we always have our t-shirts on. We always have we're always selling. We're always giving the elevator pitch. What's your opinion on when is a good time to sell? Who should be selling? And if you can shed some light, potentially as an investor or as a customer themselves.
Sure. So I do agree with you that everyone should always be selling. I think demonstrating that hustle is for sure, important. And I think the kinds of things that around business development that we're talking about are deals that are a lot bigger. So that's not just like, well, one person's going to download the software and try it out and see if they like it, right? Or like a tiny department. It's by bringing the two sides together, it creates volume that did not previously exist. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where to me, that's a key difference between a business development person and straight up sales. You know, sales presumes that not only the product is totally locked and the product price, you know, is in the ballpark, and
right.
They're getting to yes based on, you know, some terms around the edges. Biz dev still presumes that, but it's looking to scale up the size of that deal in a way that has some value exchanges that may have nothing to do with cash, but they're still very meaningful to the two companies.
Okay, so let's just lay this out.
Mm-hmm.
So you think, so let's talk about the biz dev role, the sales role, and then the marketing role. Can you repeat what your opinion is on the biz dev role again, just so our viewers have that, and I can copy it down.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure there are good, you know, official definitions out there, but where
Sure.
I see it really being meaningful with startups and how they interface with large companies is
Mm-hmm.
that you're talking about setting them up for some really serious distribution and volume.
Okay.
Generally, the revenue follows.
So it's a more long-term sell. They're thinking long
It's
term.
long term, and it should be large volume. Also, a biz dev deal, if it's a really great biz dev deal, it could mean co-selling. It could mean, it could even be something that's like published in a press release.
Sure.
It signals to the market that you mean business, that you're operating in a particular league.
That you have your act together and that you're professional.
And yeah. Sales is straight revenue, and the units can be a bit smaller. Now, over the long run, sales is critically important, and I have worked, a lot in sales, and I have great respect for sales.
Short and long.
Presumes,
short.
Still, it presumes that the product, and we are at this point talking about, productized solutions, that they're pretty stable and that they have a pretty defined price range attached to them. So the salesperson, can negotiate around the edges of what the pricing is, but it kind of is what it is.
Sure.
And then they're knocking through, target lists to see where they can move it, and where they can close those deals, close those sales, send the invoice, have them get paid, that kind of thing.
Right. And what's your take on the marketing person?
That is so different with every single company.
Right.
Some will be very transactional, like, oh, it's the logo, look and feel, blah, blah, blah. Others are really demand gen, digital marketing.
Yeah.
And then others, like in a B2B setting, could lend a lot of research around where you should be targeting, and where the sales folks and the biz dev folks should be spending their time, especially in a B2B setting, which sectors or which segments is this good for, and then what and also where and how do you, what's your go to market, where and how do you show up, so advertising in any shape or form would be part of that. Are events part of it? Are trade shows part of it? But marketing also can include things like, marketing can integrate into the product. It can be a viral mechanism that's integral to the product, or it could be outside of the product but still something that has your customers playing a role in selling your products, if you will. So marketing is so specific to each company. I find any marketing role, you really need to, both the level of the person and then the kinds of things that they include in scope, it can really differ. But you asked me, you pointed out that article, the what does that business guy at your startup do anyway? And I jotted down a few notes. And I was thinking of that business guy as the business development person. And I defined it as sort of three big chunks. One is that person has to do is qualify. So you may have a list, but they need to be qualified. Go have conversations and really kind of assess, is there something here that merits moving on? So you can disqualify a target or qualify them yet further, and that can be a whole process in and of itself.
So customer or not, or
and even do we spend time on them or not? If you're a startup of 10 people, or maybe you're the only business person on the whole team, deciding which of the people on your target list you do spend time on and which ones you don't, the faster you can qualify out the ones that are not potential right now, then you can spend more of your time on the ones that are warmer. So
Interesting.
sprinting through your list to drive the qualification, you know, and rating them somehow, you know, so some will be like, I'll hit back in a quarter, I'll loop back in, you know, 6 months, versus others will accelerate these conversations. So qualification and having a really intelligent view on qualification is not easy. But the greater skill that you have around that and discipline around it is incredibly valuable. Okay.
So they're basically the scout. They act like a scout, essentially, in a military situation where they go ahead.
They certainly can. Yeah. I think that's an important role. Others may disagree, but I believe so.
No, it makes sense. It's they go ahead and they lay the land. They see how the land is, you know, how the battlefield looks like, and they figure out which way to go and which direction to go, and they can help sales.
Or not. Yeah. So they may say, you know what, sales, don't focus there yet. It's too rough. They're not ready. So that was like the first one, qualify. The second one, so let's presume of the ones that, you know, you qualified in the near term, and whether it's you or it's sales or it's a combination, you've kind of defined what the thing, I mean, maybe my second one, actually, I'm going to insert a second one, is define what the what is.
Okay.
Right. You know, what's the what? If you were to announce a deal, what does it look like? What's in it? What is the value exchange?
So these are the details.
Who's contributing what to this transaction? You know, it might be, okay, this department at this big bank is going to use our product, and in exchange for that, we get to put their logo on our website.
Got it.
Could be that simple.
That makes sense.
You know, but it could be this big partner is going to distribute an onboarding code of our product to its mailing list of 50,000 people.
That makes sense. I mean, it's a value exchange, and that's where it goes back to, is what is the win-win situation?
Yeah.
If you're announcing something to the public and it's not a win-win situation, most people will question, you know, why is that company partnering with you?
Not just win-win, but like, what is it? Like, you know, can you point to it, and did it actually happen?
Right.
You know, there are a lot of people have talked about, you know, a Barney agreement. You know, I love you, you love me. Okay, we love each other, but if there, you know, even if there's no money, what skin is in the game? What's being exchanged, actually?
And I just want to remind our viewers that if you want to stay along with the conversation itself, you can use the hashtag Wrkbench chats, plural, and we'll be taking a look at that. Again, we're talking to Tereza, who's the entrepreneur in residence at Microsoft. Interesting. So what's the final number 3 that you think the biz dev guy does, or the business guy does?
So there's a third, and there's going to be a fourth, just because I inserted that second one. The third thing is bringing it to the finish line. Okay. Generally, like by definition, you're doing something that hasn't been done before. You do not know where the bodies are buried until this switch is turned live, and it was either distributed in that newsletter or it's live on the whatever. It's not done. Right. So
it's actually executing and
wrestling it to the ground. Yeah. And then the fourth thing is tell the story. And hopefully that story is extensible and inspirational to other similar kinds of deals that hopefully will be simpler to execute or inform your qualification across the rest of your list.
So it should set the tone of future deals. So as a benchmark, future deals could be better. Future deals could have this level of detail of the value exchange.
It sets the bar. It sets your playing field. It sets your level. It's sort of who, you know, like who are we in business with? How ambitious are we? What problems are we solving? How well respected are we, that kind of stuff.
No, I definitely think storytelling is one of the most important things. Definitely when you're talking about what qualifies you as even having a conversation, but what qualifies your product as having that conversation. Where did you get the inspiration to solve the problem that you're going after? The storytelling always seems to be the important part of that conversation.
People really respond effectively to case studies. They may hear what you're doing, let's say with Wrkbench as an example, but at any startup that's a high growth, high potential startup is creating something that's never been created before.
Yeah.
Most people do not have as vivid an imagination as the entrepreneur, and the startup people who are participating in that, right? So you need to spoon feed them that, so that they can start seeing it in their own context.
So sell the vision, almost like Steve Jobs, sell the vision and make them taste and feel the product.
Get them to taste it and then start drawing conclusions or imagining it in their own context.
So I like that.
An example of I walk through these 4 things, but then that does kind of bubble up to, okay, so let's say we landed this deal. You have a decision, kind of a fork in the road, the blue that you have here.
Yeah.
It's like, so do we now try to get 10 more deals that are like this?
Yeah.
Or do we say, okay, we landed that one, it was in this sector or this segment or whatever. Now, do I hand that off to sales and let them replicate it? And now I'm going to go to try to stake a different piece of territory and do those 4 steps for an adjacent territory and claim that land, if you will. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. And it's like, for example, for Wrkbench, one of the corny things we like to do is have fireside chats with real fireplaces in person, or when we're doing a webinar chat like this, have a fireplace in the back and call it Fireside Webinar Chats. And people just feel cozier when you're talking.
It's beautiful, by the way. I noticed that. I was like, that's a real fire.
Yeah, well, it's actually an LED fireplace, but we want. But I mean, at the end of the day, people want to feel cozy. They want to feel warm. They want to feel safe when they're dealing with other people and talking with other people. And I think storytelling, sitting around the fireplace, or just storytelling in general, allows an individual, especially a human being, to be human with another person, be more warm and be able to sell the product, instead of just going through the list of features and saying A, B, C are the features, these are the benefits, case studies, and just drowning them with too much product lingo.
That's such a good point, and I think it really brings us home too around what that really great biz dev person needs to do, which is, you just referred to warm and safe.
Yeah.
When people are trying something new, I used the word derisk before, but that relates to warm and safe, right? They want that little tinge of either the problem to be solved or that tinge of excitement in trying something new, which by definition they haven't done before, but make them feel safe while doing it. So it's like, in an area that if it does go wrong, it's not going to hurt the rest of it, or you just, it feels in control.
That's right.
So I think that's the balancing act that's needed in order to get the job done. And also, if you have that warmth and safety established in the relationship, then when things do go wrong, and they will, that they trust you, that you're going to get it right.
They have your back, essentially. They understand that they have a level of appreciation.
That's right.
That's very interesting. So, Tereza, thank you so much. I'm just writing the title, Biz Dev for Startups. Biz Dev for Startups. And I think this conversation, which we visualized using Wrkbench, I think definitely will help a lot of young entrepreneurs, especially, but entrepreneurs in general, be able to work with companies like Microsoft. It doesn't, not necessarily Microsoft itself, but large companies who are looking for solutions, and they don't necessarily have all the solutions, and they're actively looking for partners to work with, even startups. And I just want to say to our viewers, if after we're done with this conversation, you can actually go on our Flickr channel and download this board in HD and get all the notes that Tereza just mentioned, all the tactics and the strategies for startup founders to implement in order to get that business development done effectively. Tereza, any last tips you want to give to our audience before we sign off?
No, I think, well, I guess I'd say, if you are a startup and you think that Microsoft could be part of your growth path, hit me up. Maybe hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Tereza N.
I'll just and that here.
I cover New York and the East Coast, but we can hook you up with people, with my peers. And, we'd love to help you do that. That's a big part of our startup strategy is that those who are making bets on our ecosystem and on our platforms get more from it, that they're able to achieve more. So we're eager to help with that. So thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I'm hoping.
Absolutely. I was going to say social media is definitely a very powerful way to meet people. But at the end of the day, just meeting people in person is, it's important as well. And so a lot of the founders out there, get out of your box and start meeting people at meetups and conferences, and talk more about what makes you an interesting character, interesting personality, and what does the other person have to share, and don't necessarily talk about only product or only business, and get to know the person at a human level. I think that's very important. And then storytell your product as well and get that across as well. I think that's important.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
For our viewers, if you'd like to visualize your own conversation, you can head up over to Wrkbench.io. We are currently only on iOS, but in about 2 months, we'll be on Windows and Android. So that will make Tereza happy. But if you're on those other two platforms, you can go to signup.wrkbench.io and join our newsletter, and you'll be able to notify you when we're hosting our next webinar chat or Fireside chat in the coming weeks.
In fact, for some biz dev, when you are ready on Windows, you want to let me know.
Sure.
I can expose you to some of my colleagues because we all have Surfaces and we really want to be doing cool productivity stuff. So that's a biz dev opportunity for you. It's qualified. Okay.
Thanks, Tereza.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye.
Means a lot to me personally, but Wrkbench in general. So thank you so much. Have a good day. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.